He's of course entitled to his views.
It's a political argument.
He's lived in a democracy. He's more than entitled to make those views. And I don't, as a non-American, I can't speak with any expertise about whether he's right or not on his political side. But what depresses me is to see him hijacking false genetics to help his views.
What is the linkage between low intelligence and poverty?
Well, it's a classic cart and horse situation. I mean,
which comes first?
Yeah, which comes first? It's clearly the case that one of the most heritable attributes, one of the most highly inherited attributes among human families, in humans, is bank balance. Okay.
If your father leaves you
$1 million,
yeah,
you're going to be a rich person. And in fact, most rich people in Britain, perhaps even more than America, are rich because they inherited it. And most rich people are intelligent, have high IQs, because they went to decent schools. So I find
Okay, so most inheritability of bank balance is a sure thing in terms of being wealthy and not sinking into poverty. That's one. And therefore, because you also inherit a bank balance, you're able to go to better schools. And if you go to better schools, you will have a higher intelligence, and B, you have a higher intelligence?
Sure, of course they do. Why do you think that people in Charles Murray's position, people who are very rich, both in Britain and in the US, why do they send their kids to private schools? If their kids are so smart for genetic reasons, why don't they go to a high school in the Bronx? I mean, they're so smart, they don't need a decent school. When it comes to their kids, improving their kids' environment, they're more than happy to enrich their environment. When it comes to them having to pay to improve other kids' environments, particularly if those kids are black, then suddenly the agenda changes.
Includes the President of the United States, who insisted that his daughter go to a private, principally because he felt like, and Mrs. Clinton felt like, it was in the best interest of the child because of the education she would receive at the school that she was going to.
Well, I'll rest my case.
Yeah. But I want to stay with Mary just for a couple of things, because in the broad general question, how can we change intelligence? I mean, I've asked that, let me ask that one more time.
The quickest and easiest ways to change intelligence is to improve teaching. I think, if you want to change intelligence, it's conceivable, I concede the fact that it's conceivable that with vast amounts of expenditure on genetic engineering research, you may find some kind of gene for intelligence and do something with it. With 1/10 of that expenditure on high schools, you'll do the same job quicker and better.
Okay, that's my first question. My second question is, how much credence do you give to IQ test as a measure of intelligence?
I don't know the answer to that, because I'm not by any means an expert on IQ tests. I'm happy to accept that IQ tests measure something. They measure certainly the ability to do IQ tests. They're intercorrelated with something. They measure some measure of intellectual ability. That's never worried me in the slightest. But whether that measure is changeable or not by the environment is an utterly different question.
Is there a way to measure creativity by IQ test? Is there a way to measure, and Murray, it seemed to me, is always able to slip into the point as a defense of his arguments that this has to do with populations and groups and has nothing to do with the individual, who can always achieve whatever he or she might want to achieve.
I think the problem,
by virtue of whatever education early in their life, by virtue of a lot of other factors.
Isn't the problem that individuals can sue and populations can't? I mean, it's very easy to talk about populations because you're too much of a coward to talk about individuals. He doesn't have the moral fiber to go out to a black person in the street and say, "You are stupid. There is nothing you can do about it. You just sink back into poverty because that's where you belong."
Yeah, and you shouldn't be having any children because they will be stupid as well. That's the truth, the point.
Exactly.
And that's not only racist, but offensive and wrong.
And, 100 years ago, Galton himself, Francis Galton, the founder of eugenics, did say that kind of stuff. And I spend my time telling students that, and to a man and a woman, they're disgusted by it. And I just can't express how depressing I find it to see the same tired old agenda floating up again, just incidentally at a time of great political interest in the United States.
Political interest in
terms of the midterms and so on.
Oh yeah, in terms of you may make too much of conspiracy there to suggest this book came out at the time of midterm elections. I might argue with you on that point.
Us liberals are well known.
Well, exactly. Well, or to suggest that publisher somehow.
Okay, well, I know what publishers
I can tell you what this publisher's interested in: selling books.
Same as my publisher.
Same as your publisher. Now, why is it that I'll leave Charles Murray, and I assume you hope this book will slide quickly into oblivion because to be replaced by yours, because you hope it will be, because you believe it. Is it dangerous?
This view?
Yeah, the Murray book. Dangerous.
I think it's profoundly dangerous, yes.
Yeah.
Because it allows people with power and wealth to abrogate their responsibility.
Yeah.
And, I think it's a deeply...
And the other argument is made, and by some, is that, if in fact you say that all kind education and a whole series of other things, environmentally induced changes in intelligence, they don't work. If you say they don't work, then people will not want to engage in them. In a sense, they become, as you say.
Well, I return to my question, if they don't work, why send your kid to private school?
Okay. Why did you say two things about yourself? Here, with this distinguished record you have, and with this book winning the Science Booker Prize, I'm struck by two things you said. One, you said, I have sort of spent way too much of my scientific life playing around with snails. Yes, you said that?
Oh, I didn't say that. I
What
said
would you say?
most of my... I didn't say it was too much. I think it's not enough.
You say not enough?
Yeah.
Oh, because I thought it was something else in what you said. I mean, I've spent much too much of my scientific life involved with snails. You said not enough.
Well, yeah.
I mean, did you also say that you were that you were a hack?
Yeah, a hack is has a special... I don't...
What did you mean when you said you're a hack?
Well, picking me up on all these embarrassing points here. I mean, the snail thing was kind of a joke.
Okay.
But it's, I have to say, a great deal of fun and amusement out of working on snails.
Yeah.
And I'd like to be able to say, I think with great confidence actually,
Yeah.
that I'm among the world's top 5 scientific experts on the genetics of snails.
Yeah, who are there? Are there any Americans that are in that list?
But I think there are only 5 of us altogether. See, so we can all say it, and that's great.
Yes, that's right.
So if I was in human genetics, I couldn't say that.
Yeah.
And I also...
You know what, this makes this program unique, because we also had not long ago, Edmund Wilson here, who's one of the world's leading experts on ants.
Well,
so we'll go from ants to snails, and we're going to just sort of get the sort of experts on some of the
Sure, well, you're doing well.
animal species.
Edmund Wilson really is an expert on ants.
What's the great breakthrough in terms of genetics? What would cause the world to stand up and shout?
I think which I find,
Inform the world.
Inform the world. There's so many of them. A thing which has turned up recently, which I find very interesting, is the discovery that the idea that there is much genetic difference among peoples of the world, and I don't want to go back to this argument about race and IQ, is wrong. The thing which is most astonishing about the whole human species as a species is how little it's evolved. And when you compare that with snails, let's say, coming of half an hour section on snails. Snails evolve incredibly quickly. I've done an awful lot of work on snails in the Pyrenees Mountains between France and Spain.
Yeah.
The genetic differences at the DNA level between two groups of snails in two valleys 50 miles apart are far greater than the genetic difference between Australian Aboriginals and white New Yorkers. And that's kind of a remarkable fact. If you look back into history, the modern species, humans have been...
Now, what does that say?
It says, actually, that humans stopped evolving genetically because they started evolving culturally.